My name is Frank Kodak, and today, December 11th, 2013, I am pleased to have the opportunity to speak with Deborah L Rusin, Director of Library and Research Services at Catton, Mushin, Rosenman, LLP in Chicago. Our conversation is part of the Oral History of Law Librarianship project, a component of the Spinelli Law Library Reference Shelf on Hein Online. The setting for this conversation is the conference room at the headquarters of the American Association of Law Libraries in downtown Chicago. Debbie, it's a great pleasure for me to speak with you today about your life and career as a law librarian.
Thank you, Frank. It's also my pleasure to be here today, and I have to say I'm very honored to be a member of this association.
Very good. Let's begin by learning a little about you personally. Can you tell us about your early life, where you were raised, your family background, and what your childhood was like?
Sure. I was raised in the suburbs of Chicago. I am the oldest of 5 children. I have 1 sister and 3 brothers. And what I would have to say is that regarding my early childhood is that many people thought my parents were very strict, but I can't say that they were very strict because that's all I knew at the time. So it was hard for me to compare that to anything else. I wouldn't say they were strict necessarily, but what I would say is that they wanted the best for us. And when I say that, what I mean is that they really pushed education, and attending college was not a choice, it was a requirement. And other things they also pushed were taking a language. We had no choice but to take a language in high school. If we didn't want to continue with it after that point, we didn't have to. And the other thing that was a requirement was to play a musical instrument. So we started in 5th grade playing a musical instrument, and we were able to stop playing after junior high if we so wished to. But interestingly enough, we all continued through high school to play. The only request my parents had, which we didn't necessarily comply with, is that we all played different instruments, and a lot of times we're all playing different songs at the exact same time. So that kind of drove my parents crazy at the moment. Yes.
But paid off in the end,
yes,
perhaps.
It did.
Very good. So that actually is a great segue into my next question, which is, what do you do when you're not working? What are some of your hobbies, passions, and pursuits outside of law librarianship?
Okay. Sure. At one time, I was an avid tennis player. I played all through school, both high school and college, and even into my adult life. But in the past few years, I started running. And tennis and running do not necessarily go together because tennis can result in injuries with regards to running. But in the past 2 years, I've ran many, many races, including many half marathons, and this past October I just completed my 2nd marathon.
Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you. I've done a couple of duathlons where I've done biking and running, and I'm currently taking swimming lessons with the hope that next summer I could do my first triathlon.
And so is an Ironman in your
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would love to be able to
crosshairs?
do that. I would love to be able to do that, but I'm not too sure about swimming in the ocean just yet. I have to do baby steps. I'm still swimming in a pool, so.
Small steps
Yes.
lead to big steps.
Yes.
That's great. I have to attest to the fact that tennis and running don't mix. I'm a longtime runner, and I love tennis as well, and it's turned out to be one or the other, but not
Right,
both, so
right.
I totally understand that. Well, great. Now that we know a little bit about your, I neglected to mention, tell us about where you stand on musical instruments today.
With regards to, well, I played both the oboe and the violin. So if I had, it's hard to choose. I don't really know which one I would choose. I mean, they're both very different. Obviously, one's a string instrument, one's a reed. But to this day, I kept both of them.
For you.
And I still have all my music that I kept, even starting with Mary Had a Little Lamb. So I always think about going back to it sometime. Maybe, I don't want to say I want to wait till I retire, but I would definitely like to get back to it. It's just a matter of finding the time to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But like I said, I kept both of them, just waiting to be picked up any moment.
Well, I'm sure you'll have some opportunities there in the future, and it's probably like riding a bike, hopefully. Well, in any case, and now that we know something about your personal life, can you tell us a little bit about your educational and professional training and perhaps your early career aspirations?
Sure. After high school, I ended up going to Loyola University of Chicago, and what I started out doing there was I was a biology major. And shortly after being a biology major, I switched to economics because I thought that was a practical thing to do. But it turns out that math is not my strong suit. So what I would say in regards to that is that law librarianship was not something that was in my immediate, that I necessarily thought of or was necessarily something that I considered at the time. So I went from biology major to an economics major, which again, math was not my strong suit, so I ended up switching to a philosophy major. Loyola is a Jesuit school, so they require a lot of philosophy classes, and I was hooked once I took those classes. I became a philosophy major with the thought that I would go to law school. But before I did that, I kind of wanted to test the waters, so I went and got my paralegal certificate before I went to law school. And once I did that, I realized that what I really wanted to do was not practice law, but to conduct legal research. And I had the benefit of working for some small boutique firms where I got to do a lot of the research, but because they were small boutique firms, I was able to do everything from helping to draft interrogatories. Again, I went to court with the attorneys. I mean, this is the days before the computers. We would have to drive, down to the judge and get jury instructions approved. So I really, really enjoyed being a paralegal, but I wanted to do the legal research. So what I started doing was looking at jobs. I knew it would be a larger law firm that would have librarians, but I looked to see what their job requirements were, and they basically all said you have a master's in library science. So then I went back to school to get my graduate degree. And so law librarianship kind of found me as opposed to me looking for it.
Very good. So as a paralegal, you kind of whet your appetite on the research and then figured out that, well, if I want to do this,
Right.
perhaps the law
Right.
librarian position would be the thing you should aim for.
Correct.
Very good. Okay. So let's just to catch us up here. You began as a research librarian at Altheimer and Gray, a law firm in Chicago, in 1999. Can you tell us a little bit about that first library position?
Sure. Just prior to that job, I was working at Abbott Laboratories, cataloging non-clinical studies. And while I enjoyed that was something I knew I didn't want to do forever. So I was looking for law librarianship jobs, and Altheimer and Gray happened to come up. But this was the time, these were the days when it was large print collections. I still remember Lawyers Co-op and West. Shepherdizing did not mean Lexis. It meant looking to see if something was still good case law. And I remember the softbound volumes, and I can't remember the order, but it was, I think, red, gold, and blue, if I remember correctly. So the libraries were very large, and we had maybe one or two Lexis and Westlaw terminals, if that at all. And they were not things that were in the foreground. They were definitely something in the background. I mean, that was something that attorneys got trained on, but we were still training them on print resources. We did a lot of that. Again, like I said, we had large collections. But the thing that was really nice about it was that I was able to really hone my research skills because I had to dive into the print resources. I didn't just learn how to, like I said, shepherdize by hitting a button, or whether it's Keysight or Shepherds and whatnot. So I really had to kind of dig into all that and learn my skill set.
And to understand what
Right.
materials contained and how they work.
Exactly. And actually at Altheimer and Gray, I eventually ended up becoming when I was a research librarian, my area of expertise was M&A and corporate securities. And it was at Altheimer and Gray that I first began to learn about that. But I have to tell you a little bit of a funny story. Was that the first time I got a request for SEC, Securities Exchange Commission, I thought they said SIC. So I pulled the Standard Industrial Classification Code because I didn't know, so it's just, so that was like the very beginning of learning securities research was at Altheimer and Gray. Unfortunately, I was there until the firm collapsed, which was in 2003. So I didn't necessarily plan on leaving the firm just then, but I had no choice.
So, if I've got my my information correct, you then follow that with a short stint at Skadden Arps.
Correct.
And then you moved on to Latham and Watkins
Correct.
in 2004. And you were a reference librarian there for 4 years, then a research librarian until leaving the firm in 2011.
Correct.
So and maybe you can help me understand this. You had a change in positions from reference to research. Did that reflect a change? Do you think that reflects a change in the focus of private law librarians generally, or was this just a personal advancement within the firm?
Well, what the firm did was this is a way for them to actually give advancement. I mean, not everybody could be the library manager, the library director, so they wanted to create various tiers of positions. So they had the reference librarians, and then they created the research librarian position. But in order to become a research librarian, the idea was obviously, maybe by the title, you could tackle more complex legal research. The expectation was now you're shifting from legal to business research. Now you're able to use a Bloomberg terminal, you're using Thomson One Banker, you're using Capital IQ, resources such as that we're able to use. What they also did was they also created what they called an M&A team, mergers and acquisitions. And this was a team that was, I don't know if I want to say it was higher than a research librarian, but it kind of spun off from that. And it was a very select group of individuals who could even do a higher level of business, securities, private equity research such as that. So back to your question, it was a way to create advancement within the firm.
But it was also a recognition that there's different
Yes.
kinds of research and different
Correct.
levels of expertise and different types of
Correct.
expertise.
Correct.
Very good. So in 2011, you changed employers again,
Yes.
becoming Director of Library and Research Services at Catton Mushin, the position you currently hold. What has it been like to lead a major law firm library in what euphemistically might be called interesting times?
Well, I have to tell you that it was a big step for me to go from being a research librarian to being a director, and I feel very honored to have had that opportunity. When I first started, it's probably as it is still to this day, it's extremely challenging to do the job. You have limited resources sometimes with the expectation you're going to do more with less. It took me about 6 months being there just to begin to feel comfortable, just to get a sense of what was going on. And with my predecessor, we had 2 weeks of overlap. So we had 2 weeks to kind of work together, and then I was on my own.
Pardon me, your predecessor being Susan Siebers?
That's correct.
Okay. Mhm.
Correct. So we had 2 weeks of overlap, and then I was kind of tossed on my own to do that. But it did take me some time to kind of figure out what was going on. But as I said, I completely, challenged a lot of times. I'm never bored doing my job. But since the day I became a law librarian, I wanted to have my own library, or to manage my own library.
So I wonder, you talked about the fact that your role as a research librarian changed considerably when you became director. Was there really any overlap in the range of responsibilities that you have as director as opposed to what you had as research librarian?
Well, one of the things that I feel has helped me in the position is that because I was a research librarian for so long, or so currently, it wasn't that far before I was, since I was a research
Right.
librarian to director, that I was able to understand or know what was good research skills, or what was the expectation of the research skills, or what were we kicking out added value, were we giving what I thought that the requesters were looking for. With regards to overlap, there also is, I became very familiar as a research librarian with being cognizant of costs. Both Lexis and Westlaw. Now I was on the other end of it. I was actually looking at the bills and seeing, okay, well, what is the research we're doing? How much is it costing? And it was now my responsibility to actually make sure that we were in the parameters of what the expectations were.
Very good.
So,
Right.
yeah, right, to do that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you've spent your entire professional law library career in the law firm environment. Can you reflect a little more generally, not specifically about your positions necessarily, but generally about the firm environment and the work of the firm librarian? How has that changed over the course of your career? You talked earlier about the nature of the materials and the work that you did initially, and now it's different. So I wonder if you can expand on that.
Sure. Well, and again, in regards to the difference of materials, but also what we're seeing is that stepping outside the four walls of the library. And I think that a librarian who digs their heels in and refuses to leave those four walls, they're kind of putting themselves in a bad position to maybe be outsourced. But what I'm seeing a lot is we're shifting from legal to business research. I think 80% of what we're doing now is business research. And a lot of what we're doing is, again, we are embedded librarians. I require the librarians to actually sit in departmental meetings at least once a quarter to do that as part of their, now the review process. The other thing is we do a tremendous amount of work for marketing, business development, recruiting. We're seeing a lot of that, which in years past, I didn't necessarily get those requests as a reference librarian. The most I would get was to pull a registered agent for somebody. So now what we've done is we've created dossiers. So we worked with the marketing department so they have their branding and the questions they wanted answered, but it's the reference librarians who are actually pulling the data to put into the dossier so that when the attorney goes to do a pitch at the client, they have all information in one spot. But I think that the reference librarians, as the experts in doing the research, were best positioned to actually do that. So there's a lot of collaboration with other departments, and we really try to go out there and walk the halls and do what I call elevator talks, which I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with or aware of, doing that and just trying to go out and push ourselves out there and sell ourselves out to the firm and just making sure we have added value. I no longer want to just hand somebody a bunch of papers, but at the same time, because we're not attorneys, we can't necessarily analyze the law, but it's more we want to just, instead of just jeopardizing something, we maybe want to highlight where they need to pay attention to. We maybe want to bound some of the information for them. So we want to kind of preview it a little bit and maybe think to ourselves, well, okay, they asked for a particular vendor report, maybe let's give them something else too. But we don't want to inundate them with too much. So again, there's that balance.
It's a delicate balance.
Yes.
So it's interesting, this figure that you threw out, 80%, that's, at least for me, a pretty startling figure. Certainly not challenging you on that, I believe you, but it is a startling figure. And I take it that if somehow you could measure the percent or proportion of legal research that you say 15 years ago or something like that might have done, it would have been much higher versus the amount of business or non-legal research that you do now. So what does that mean for the people that you hire? What kinds of skills or background are you looking for in today's world?
Well, I will tell you that some of the recent librarians we've hired, not only am I looking for master's degree in library science, but one individual we hired used to be an instructor for Microsoft Office. Because I need somebody who can also, for our usage reports and whatnot, we are now doing them as Excel spreadsheets. So again, we're even working with the accounting department to go ahead and help process the vendor invoices. But I never had that before in the past. We are also trying to do manuals for the department, and we are using programs such as Visio. I don't know how to use Visio, but I need somebody who can use that program, to do all that. So again, there's that overlap between, I think, what is traditional legal research, what we've thought of legal research, and what we thought of more as business skills.
Makes sense.
I mean, I know those are programs and whatnot, but also knowing how to search more businesses or how to search medical and things such as that.
So you're still looking for someone with the library training, library information science training, and that degree, but perhaps something in addition to that, and it might be a variety of different things.
Correct.
So that you can have full coverage within your firm.
Right.
And it sounds like in today's world, the law firm librarian, having a library degree plus a law degree wouldn't really be that important, because most of what you're doing is not really legal research.
Correct. I mean, one thing I do is when I have new librarians, I do have them do loosely filing. Carefully do loosely filing. I mean, I will walk them through it because I feel that by getting their hands on the resources, that's the best way for them to learn what resources we have and possibly how those resources work, as opposed to just perusing the collection and just kind of doing a shelf read. So I want them to actually get their hands on that. But I also want them to, again, hone their business research skills to do both. Because the requirements are both.
So one more question about this. It's a fascinating subject, and it seems like it's a fast-changing world. But so what's the mix of your, I was going to say collection, but maybe the better word is your access to information resources today? What do you continue to maintain in a
Mhm.
tangible print form, and what do you rely on electronically or
Right.
being
Right.
accessible in some other way?
Right. Well, what we're doing is, most, at one time we had all the state statutes and all the state court rules. We've changed a lot of that. What we're doing, we're trying to be a little bit conservative and keep the statutes in the same circuits we practice in. But that became a little bit difficult for Ninth Circuit because it's so large. So we're
Sure.
kind of looking at that a little bit. What we're also looking at is not only what the vendors carry, because we don't want to necessarily lock ourselves into having to have these subscriptions with the vendors. But we are more so looking at, treatises, things like that, we'll keep more so in print. Old things such as the tax materials we'll keep in print. I think we have the state standard federal tax reporter back to the 50s. I mean, that I can't get the attorneys to get rid of, even if we wanted them to. I mean, it's become wallpaper in the library, or a border. I mean, it's all over the place that we have it.
Mm.
But again, it's kind of looking at what we do need and what we don't need. I mean, we still have things that maybe for the summer associates, like we have both statutes, both encyclopedias, amateur and CJS. We still have words and phrases. So things that I consider more so for the associates to use to kind of get themselves hands-on and to kind of understand the
Into
process.
understanding the
Right, the key number
sources.
system and things like that, head notes and things. But a lot of the databases we're going to are very specialized databases. Are more so, again, kind of like some of your business
Mhm.
things, databases that will allow us to pull league tables for the business end of things, that will allow us to pull, okay, don't ask me what this means, but stock splits necessarily, that we can't do through the print resources that we have, but those are requests we're getting. So those are some of the databases we're turning to, is things that can produce that type of information for us.
Well, again, going back to what you're doing for summer associates and the like, I come at it
Mhm.
from the academic point of view, and
Mhm.
I know the challenges of trying to teach into students who really expect everything to be available
Mhm.
online, who really expect to be able to do everything on their own, but who realistically barely scratch the surface of understanding how to use the
Mhm.
basic legal research systems, not even to mention specialized legal
Mhm.
research services or business information services. I kind of get it why you're doing all of that business or non-legal
Mhm,
research. They're able to do, they have a library on their desktop
Right.
for legal research, but not in the other areas.
Mm-hmm.
So I imagine that's a challenge to you to deal with
Right.
people coming out of law school who think they know more than perhaps
Right.
they actually do.
I had, through AALL, we've had a lot of discussions with, the privates versus, or I shouldn't say versus, but with the academics. And one of the things we've talked about time and time again is that the need to come into a law firm understanding the business aspect of it, understanding how a firm operates, understanding, some of their costs, not the overhead, billing back. Again, we all talk about how it's not free like it is in law school, but understanding that concept, the business model. And even the firm I'm at now, we've recently added a CIO, a CEO,
Mhm.
so it's going more with that business model
Mhm.
to do that. And even our summer associate, or more so our fall associate program, is kind of gone through not just Lexis and Westlaw, but we have a progressive training session that lasts now about 3 months, where we introduce new databases as we go along. Because the thought is that if we hit them with all this in the beginning, they're not going to remember all of it. And we don't distribute passwords until they've gone through training. It's
Oh, really?
mandatory. Yes, it's
Very good.
mandatory that they.
Good for you. I wish we could get away with that in
Yeah.
law school. They demand it immediately, and they seem to get it. Well, we've talked a lot about your professional experience. It's been very, very interesting, and we may come back to it. But I'd like to switch gears right now by asking you to reflect on some of the individuals you've met and worked
Yes.
with during your career. And in particular, is there someone who you might consider to be your mentor, or others in the profession?
Yes. Now, I don't know if she knows it or
admire?
not, but I've always seen for a long time, my mentor to be Barbara Bentliff.
Uh-huh.
And what's interesting is that now I'm going off the board and I'm going to San Antonio. My very first conference was in San Antonio in 2005. And at that conference, I attended a program And I can't tell you all the individuals that were on the panel, but Barbara was on the panel, and the title of it was something like Strategies from the Top. I think that was part of the title. And it was basically, you know, how to climb the ranks and get to where you want to be in a law library or in any library. And it was interesting because there was a lot of people in the audience, but I felt as though that panel was speaking directly to me. So what I had done was afterwards, I had written thank you letters to all those individuals on the panel. I didn't send emails, I wrote handwritten thank you letters. So what had happened was Barbara had responded to my letter, and we became, she was my mentor, and she kind of coached me or encouraged me through the years about what I would need to do to climb the ranks. And you know, one of the first things she said was submit a program proposal. I did that, but the first few I did were shot down. You know, but you have to keep trying. So I guess that's one thing I would say to individuals is don't give up. You know, because she was also telling me program proposals, getting involved with various committees, volunteering for various things. So through the years, we've talked, we've gotten together at various conferences and whatnot, but I've always seen her as like my long distance mentor to do that.
That's great and very interesting, since of course Barbara, who's a very well respected member of our profession, has been a law school librarian all of her career, which just goes to show that there's lots of connections to be made in this profession, not limited by the type of library you happen to work in.
Exactly. But two more individuals I want to kind of do a shout out for are also Keith Ann Stuyvesant at Kent College of Law, and also Mark Estes. Both of them, I really admire the work that they've done for the association, and both have really encouraged me and supported me through my profession as well. So again, I just kind of want to give a shout out to both of them.
And again, Keith being an academic law librarian.
Yes.
And Mark, first an academic, then a private law librarian for many years, and now a county law librarian.
Yeah, isn't it interesting how they were all academics to begin with?
Yeah. Well, good. That's great. Deb, you've served the law library profession in a variety of roles on both the national and local levels. For example, you were president of the Chicago Association of Law Libraries. You chaired the Law Library Journal and AAL Spectrum Committee, and you served as secretary of the Private Law Library Special Interest Section. And now you're in your third year on the AAL Executive Board as the association secretary. I'm going to ask you a number of questions, but the first one is, what has led you to be so active in the profession? And perhaps you've already suggested that Barbara had something to do with that.
Yes, but also what I want to say to that is that the association has given so much to me that I wanted to give back to the association. Not only that I feel that I wanted to give back, I felt that I needed to give back. And I wanted to kind of lay maybe the path for newer law librarians and encourage them as well. And the benefits I received from the association are numerous. And what I think that's very important to do is that individuals, I think by serving on committees or on the board or chairing committees, you really develop a new appreciation for the work that goes into the association. And I've come to realize by serving on the executive board that decisions are not made lightly. The board really considers what's in the best interest of the association as a whole, and they really, really strive to be transparent in the work that they do. And again, I don't think you have a better understanding, or you have the best understanding by actually serving on various committees. So I kind of wanted to know the association that I was a member of. I just didn't want to kind of just show up and be there. So again, the association's given me a lot by whether it's networking, and I think that's a question that's going to come up, but whether it's networking or getting to know individuals or supporting me in my own job, the things I've learned. So that's a lot of what I've gotten out of the association.
Well, we're going to come back to that in just a moment, but I want to make sure that I ask this question. So I listed a couple of the things you've done, and as I say, there are other things as well. I wonder if there are any, I don't know if you call them stories, but any things in particular that you recall either with fondness or perhaps not so fond about some of these roles that you've filled. Any work that you've done that you particularly think was satisfying, fulfilling?
Well, I think it's a lot of it's, or most of it has been very satisfying to do that, but along the same lines, it's very challenging because there's always those divisions within the association. There's always those different personalities in the association, and you try to please everybody, but you can't. So sometimes it's difficult to make decisions, and again, you're trying to make the best decision for the entire association. So I think that's what's always been a little bit difficult, even serving on the executive board, because we are trying to make decisions that are best, but there's always those challenges where each, maybe SIS or whatnot, is looking for, again, I think that's your own personal interests. They're looking to see what would benefit. And I don't think it's, a conscious choice to not benefit the whole association, but it just becomes difficult to do that. Because even on the board, there's difference of opinion.
Well, it certainly is true that there's a great deal of commonality over
Mm-hmm.
the broad spectrum of the membership of both the local and national associations, but on the other hand, there are constituency groups that will also have their own individual needs and issues, and it's not surprising, I suppose, that occasionally those will come in conflict with
Right.
that bigger picture, and it
Mhm.
does make things a little bit challenging on occasion.
Mhm. But I have to say that my employers have always supported my attending. So I guess that's one of the huge benefits, that I've had the opportunity to attend the various meetings that I've gone to date, and just the things I've learned and the people I've met throughout there.
Well, that's a good segue into the next question, which
Okay.
I wanted to ask you. Perfectly, you're setting me up. I appreciate that. So it is not easy for today's
No.
law librarian to find the time and the institutional support
Right.
to participate in professional
Right.
activities. You talked about attending your first meeting in 2005 and hearing Barbara and being inspired by her and seeking her out. So I'm wondering, do you have, and you've already mentioned some, but do you have any suggestions for newer law library
Yes.
colleagues about how they can participate, how they can
Mhm.
approach professional service in a time when so many librarians are asked to do more with less?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, one of the things too, what I do, how I approach the firm in order to attend a lot of these conferences or meetings, both on a local level or a national level, again, knowing that, resources are limited, so it's difficult for them to think, well, why should I pay out, $2,000, $2,500 for you to attend a conference when, what does it do to benefit the firm? I always approach it with, I am marketing for the firm. Every single thing I do has the firm's name attached to it. So wherever I go, it's free marketing. I'm marketing for you free. Whether it's on a committee or on my name badge. So I pose it partly that way.
Mhm.
I also have an example of, networking too. And they're like, oh, networking, they think it's just, a big cocktail party or just, having a good old time. But I have a story where, and I can't tell you exactly what year it was, but I went to one of the conferences and I met somebody from Washington, state of Washington, who I just knew was an acquaintance, only talked to a few times at a
Mhm.
couple different gatherings
Mhm.
while at the conference. I had come back to work, and no sooner had I come back that the request I got was to do a legislative history for the state of Washington. And the partner told me that if we didn't get it done that day, he was going to put an associate on the plane and send him to Washington to do the legislative history. And I thought, where are you sending them? But you know what I mean? You only question people so much. So I was like, okay, go for it. Put them on the plane. But, there's many libraries as part of the school and whatnot. But I had called this individual that I met at the annual conference. And I was just looking for guidance as to where to start the legislative history. And unbeknownst to me, she ended up doing the whole entire legislative history for me. That was not my expectation. I didn't, I wasn't asking her to do that. I just asked her for some guidance. But that is one of the benefits I got from going to the conference. And I made sure that my employer knew that legislative history being completed in that short of time was due to somebody I had met at the annual conference.
Good for you.
To do
That's
that.
a great story to
Mhm,
share with others. It's not only an example to me of the value of networking, knowing who to call, but also the fact that law librarians are typically of a sort that would go out of their way
Right.
to help you.
Correct.
And that's quite a story. So I wonder if what would you say to a newer law librarian that says, well, you know, my firm or even my law school or the county law librarian that I'm at are really not too keen on me going, and quite honestly, I've got a lot of work to do. I just don't have time to do these sorts of things. So it's not even just that I can't get institutional support, it's just that my time is limited and I just really can't fit it in. And I wonder what you might say to somebody that says something like that
kind
to
of
you.
hesitant to attend.
I've actually had that happen to me with individuals where they weren't too keen on attending the annual meetings. And I've really just, I don't want to make somebody go if they don't really want to go, but I've encouraged them to go. I've told them some of my stories that have benefited me through the years. I've stressed that I really believe that I went from where I've climbed through the ranks in a short period of time, I think it's a short period of time, by, again, networking, meeting all these various people, how it's benefited me professionally, and even though it's work up front, and it's work through the whole time, I mean, I can't deny that, it's a lot of work to both have my job and to volunteer, but it's very rewarding professionally, it's very rewarding personally, so I think that they need to give it a try before they shoot it down so quickly. I think it's a huge benefit that they may not realize.
I'm glad you mentioned it's not only rewarding professionally, but it's also rewarding personally. And I've always thought that was one of the big things about participating beyond the four walls of your own organization is that it has the potential for just being a lot of fun.
Right.
And for meeting people who might start out as professional colleagues, but who have become longtime personal friends and all that sort of thing, so that it kind of moves it from being a job to a personally enriching career.
And it could be in small steps, because I myself, what I did was for my local association call, that started out by myself writing one article for a column, just one article. And that eventually turned into myself writing the column, co-chairing the publication and chairing the publication, then serving on the board. Now this was all things that I have done my own volition. I had a goal in mind that I was going to really strive to do this. But I knew that I had to kind of pay my dues. And I think that's one of the things is individuals want to automatically be on the executive board before they kind of, done their time or pay their dues. But after being on the local association and also sitting as president on that's when then I started trying to get more involved with AAL. Again, being on a committee, doing a program proposal, maybe it didn't get accepted the first time. And I tell individuals that now, it's like, don't give up, don't be so discouraged, because you have to remember that you're depending upon what the pool of individuals who are trying to submit those program proposals are, how many program proposals are on the same subject. They want to try to have a good balance between privates, academics, state, court, county librarians, and I think it's just, it's baby steps.
Right. Sometimes the numbers aren't with you, but sometimes
Correct.
they are. That's right. Great. Well, I think that's another great suggestion, with starting out locally and then kind of building up. And I love your story about writing one article and what that can lead to, because I've often found that frequently that is enough to get you known by somebody, and then somebody will ask you to do something, and you'll do that something, and then someone else will consider you, gee, you might be interested in this, and then before you know it, you're heavily involved. So that's usually the story I tell when someone asks me, how do I get involved? I say, just find something to do.
Right, just start.
That's right. That's right. Excellent. Well, Debbie, we're nearing the end of our conversation. I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to touch on any topics that are important to you, which we might not have covered yet. So is there anything you'd like to add before we conclude?
Just one thing I want to say quickly was that I think that if I could leave any parting words for other members or newer members or any members, I think that what you really need to do is start out by believing in yourself. So when others tell you that you can't do something, or you're going to go from being where you're at and you're never going to get to the other place, I think you have to, again, believe in yourself and believe in the quality of the work you deliver. But at the same time, I think you have to keep in mind that you get one and only one chance to make a first impression. So I know when my position that I currently have opened up, by previous title, I had never been a library director before. I knew it was a long shot to go from that, from being a research librarian to being a director, but I wanted this job and I wanted it bad. And I felt as though my time had come. I mean, I had been, I don't want to say waiting, but I had been trying to, do this
Mhm.
for basically about 20 years. Now, maybe that's premature, but basically since I graduated from, getting my master's degree, I'm like, I want to have my own library. But when the job did open up, I went home and I locked myself up for 3 days. I think it was a long weekend that I was able to do that. And I didn't write my resume, I crafted my resume. I picked and chose every word very carefully because, again, I knew that I had only one chance to make a first impression. And that's what I would say to a lot of individuals when they go out there, whether it's a program proposal or a job proposal. Even with programs, as we talked about as a way to
Mhm.
kind of baby steps into it. Look at it to make sure that, the language is really what you wanted to say, that you're conveying what somebody's looking for. Again, you have one chance to make a first impression, whatever it may be. But so, again, and I don't always see that. So I think you have to really be, again, I think it goes back to believing in yourself and the quality of work you have to deliver.
Well, that is absolutely great advice, and I particularly like the notion of taking 3 days to make sure you get it correct, because as someone who's edited many things, I can frequently
Okay,
tell the
good.
person who's taken 3 days and the person
Doesn't-
who's taken 30 minutes.
Okay.
So that definitely comes through. Deborah Rusin, on behalf of Pat Keogh and Michelle Wu, my colleagues with the Oral History of Law Librarianship Project, I want to thank you for taking time from your busy schedule to speak with us today about your experiences as a law librarian. Your remarks will be a valuable addition to the project and of interest to both current colleagues and those who will join the profession in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you, it's been my pleasure.